It belongs to her. The words cut through the tense air of Lumiere, a high-end Manhattan boutique silencing whispers. A black woman strides in, her white dress hugging her frame, simple yet radiating elegance. This is Ngozi, Aisha's mother, her presence commanding respect. Mrs. Catherine, face flushed with embarrassment, stammers while Emily cowers behind her. But what led to this moment? Where are you listening from? New York, London, or beyond? Drop your location in the comments and tell us, what do you think happens next? Subscribe now to catch our latest stories of courage and justice. And don't miss how this unfolds. Will prejudice triumph, or will truth prevail? Aisha's journey, a clash of dignity and bias, holds secrets you won't expect. Stick around to see how one girl's stand and a mother's strength rewrite the narrative in a way that'll leave you speechless. The heart of Manhattan pulsed with ambition, its streets a symphony of honking taxis and hurried footsteps. Nestled among the towering glass facades of Fifth Avenue, Lumiere stood like a beacon of opulence. Its crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across racks of silk and satin, each dress a whispered promise of elegance. The air inside was perfumed, with jasmine and wealth, a sanctuary for those who could afford its dreams. On this crisp autumn afternoon, the boutique hummed with quiet anticipation, its polished marble floors reflecting the soft glow of wealth. But beneath the surface a storm was brewing, one that would challenge the very soul of the place. Aisha, a 15-year-old with skin like polished ebony, pushed open the heavy glass doors. Her white t-shirt and faded jeans were a stark contrast to the boutique's grandeur, but her eyes sparkled with purpose. Her natural curls, tied high in a defiant ponytail, bounced with each step. Aisha was no stranger to standing out. Her family had immigrated from Nigeria when she was 5, and she'd learned to carry her heritage like a crown. Today, though, her heart raced for a different reason. In 2 weeks, she would perform her first solo violin piece at Juilliard's annual recital, and she had come to claim the emerald dress she'd ordered months ago, a gown she'd saved for with every penny from babysitting and busking in Central Park. The dress was her talisman, a deep green masterpiece with delicate lace that shimmered, like a forest under moonlight. Aisha had seen it in Lumiere's catalog, its image burned into her dreams. She'd placed the order with trembling hands, paying the deposit with crumpled bills and a heart full of hope. Today was the day she'd hold it, feel its weight, and know it was hers. As she stepped inside, the cool air brushed her skin, and she allowed herself a small smile. This was her moment. But the boutique had other plans. The moment Aisha crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted, subtle as a held breath. 2 sales associates perched behind a sleek counter froze mid-conversation. Their eyes, sharp, appraising, swept over her, lingering on her sneakers, her plain shirt, her skin. One, a woman with a tight blonde bun and a name tag reading Claire, whispered to her colleague, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. "What's she doing here? She doesn't look like our usual clientele." The words were soft, meant to be private, but they sliced through the quiet, landing like a slap. Aisha heard them. Her smile faltered, but she straightened her shoulders, refusing to let the sting take root. She'd faced whispers before, in school hallways, on subway platforms, but she hadn't expected them here, not in a place she'd dreamed of as a sanctuary. Clutching the strap of her worn backpack, she approached the counter, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The other customers, 2 women browsing a rack of gowns, an older man in a suit flipping through a catalog, glanced her way, their curiosity tinged with something she couldn't name. "Excuse me," Aisha said, her voice clear and steady, practiced from years of performing. "I'm here to pick up a dress I ordered. It's the emerald gown from the spring collection." "My name's Aisha." Claire's lips pursed, her manicured fingers hovering over the tablet on the counter. She didn't meet Aisha's gaze, instead tapping the screen with deliberate slowness. "Let me check," she said, her tone clipped, as if Aisha's request was an inconvenience. The other associate, a younger woman with a sharp bob, leaned over to glance at the screen, her expression mirroring Claire's skepticism. "Emerald gown," she muttered, just loud enough for Aisha to hear. "That's not exactly budget-friendly." Aisha's stomach tightened, a familiar knot of frustration and hurt. She knew what they were implying, had heard it in 1,000 different ways. Too poor, too different, too black. But she'd prepared for this. She reached into her backpack, pulling out a crumpled receipt, its edges worn from being checked and rechecked. "Here's my confirmation," she said, sliding it across the counter. "I placed the order 2 months ago and paid the deposit. It should be ready." Claire took the receipt, her fingers brushing it as if it might be contagious. She scanned it, her brows knitting together in a performance of confusion. She said, dragging the sound out. "There might be a mix-up. This dress, it's one of our exclusives. Not everyone can just walk in and claim it." She looked up, her eyes meeting Aisha's for the first time, and there it was, a flicker of disdain, sharp and cold. Aisha's hands clenched at her sides, but her voice remained steady. "I'm not just anyone. I ordered it, paid for it, and it's mine. Could you please check again?" Her words were polite, but they carried an edge, a quiet defiance that made the younger associate shift uncomfortably. Claire sighed, a theatrical exhale, and tapped the tablet again. "Fine," she said, as if granting a favor. "But if it's not here, you'll have to take it up with customer service." She turned away, her heels clicking as she disappeared into the back, leaving Aisha standing alone at the counter. The younger associate busied herself with straightening a stack of brochures, avoiding Aisha's gaze. The boutique's opulence felt suffocating now, its beauty tainted by the weight of judgment. Aisha glanced around, catching the eyes of the other customers. The 2 women by the gowns whispered to each other, their hands covering their mouths. The man in the suit looked up from his catalog, his expression unreadable. Aisha felt exposed, as if her very presence was a question they were all trying to answer. Why is she here? What does she want? She took a deep breath, grounding herself. She thought of the violin waiting at home, its smooth wood a comfort against her fingers. She thought of the recital, the spotlight, the music that would pour from her soul. And she thought of the dress, her dress waiting somewhere in this gilded cage. No one, not Claire, not the whispers, could take that from her. As she stood there, the glass doors swung open again, and a new energy entered the room. A woman in a silk dress, her daughter trailing behind, swept in like they owned the place. Their arrival shifted the air, drawing every eye. Aisha didn't know it yet, but their presence would ignite the spark that set everything ablaze. The air in Lumiere thickened, charged with an unspoken challenge as the glass doors swung shut behind the new arrivals. Mrs. Catherine Wentworth, a woman whose presence seemed to demand the room's attention, strode in with the confidence of someone who had never been denied. Her silk dress shimmered under the chandeliers, and the pearl bracelet on her wrist caught the light like a badge of privilege. Trailing her was Emily, her 17-year-old daughter, clad in a pink chiffon dress that screamed money. Emily's blonde hair was swept into a flawless updo, her lips curled in a smirk that mirrored her mother's air of superiority. The boutique, already a stage of subtle judgments, now felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Aisha stood by the counter, her receipt still lying untouched where Claire, the sales associate, had left it. The sting of Claire's earlier words, "Not everyone can just walk in and claim it," lingered, but Aisha's resolve held firm. She was here for her emerald dress, the one she'd dreamed of wearing at Juilliard's recital. Her fingers tightened around her backpack strap, anchoring her against the growing unease. The other customers, a pair of women in gowns, a man in a suit, shifted their attention to Catherine and Emily, their whispers fading into a hushed reverence. Lumiere was their domain, and Aisha, in her white t-shirt and jeans, was an outsider they could afford to ignore. Catherine's heels clicked against the marble floor, each step a declaration of authority. She bypassed Aisha without a glance, her gaze fixed on the counter where the younger sales associate, now visibly flustered, stood. "I'd like to see the emerald gown from the spring collection," Catherine announced, her voice crisp and commanding, "My daughter needs it for a gala next week. It's urgent." Aisha's heart lurched. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the sudden tightness in her chest. "Excuse me, that's the dress I ordered. I placed it 2 months ago and paid the deposit." Her words cut through the boutique's hum, drawing every eye. The women by the gowns froze, their hands hovering over a rack of silk. The man in the suit looked up, his catalog forgotten. Even Claire, emerging from the back with a tablet in hand, paused, her expression unreadable. Catherine turned, slowly, as if noticing Aisha for the first time. Her eyes, ice blue and sharp, raked over Aisha's frame, lingering on her sneakers. Her plain shirt, her dark skin. A smile, thin and venomous, curved her lips. "Ordered it?" she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Sweetheart, that gown is a statement piece. It's meant for someone who can carry it. Perhaps you should look elsewhere." She gestured vaguely, as if dismissing Aisha to some lesser corner of the world. Emily, emboldened by her mother's lead, stepped forward, her smirk widening. "Yeah, it's perfect for me," she said, tossing her hair. "I mean, no offense, but you don't exactly scream Lumiere. Maybe try a thrift store." Her words, sharp as a blade, drew a gasp from one of the women by the gowns. The boutique's air grew heavier, the tension coiling like a spring. Aisha's face burned, but she stood taller, her eyes locking onto Catherine's. "I ordered that dress," she repeated, each word deliberate. "I paid for it. It's mine." Her voice, trained by years of performing, carried a quiet power that made Emily falter, if only for a moment. But Catherine was unmoved. She turned to Claire, her smile now a weapon. "I'm a VIP client," she said, her voice low but firm. "I expect that gown to be prepared for Emily. Now." Claire, caught between Aisha's receipt and Catherine's authority, hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the younger associate, who shrugged helplessly. "Well," Claire began, her voice wavering, "there's a record of a deposit, but Mrs. Wentworth is a priority customer." She reached for a velvet box on the counter, lifting the lid to reveal the emerald gown, its fabric gleaming like a jewel. Aisha's breath caught. It was her dress, her dream, lying there vulnerable. "No," Aisha's voice rose, sharp and clear. "That's mine. You can't just give it away." The boutique fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Catherine laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Dear, you're making a scene. This isn't your place. Let Emily have it. She'll make it shine." Emily nodded, already reaching for the gown, her fingers brushing the lace with greedy anticipation. The other customers watched, their faces a mix of discomfort and curiosity. One woman whispered to her companion, "She did say she ordered it," but no one spoke up. Aisha's hands trembled, not with fear, but with a fire she could barely contain. "I'm not leaving without my dress," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "And I'm not letting you decide what's mine." Catherine's smile vanished. She leaned closer, her voice a hiss. "You don't belong here. Accept it." The words were a slap meant to break her, but Aisha didn't flinch. She met Catherine's gaze, her eyes blazing with defiance. The boutique, once a temple of elegance, was now a battlefield, and Aisha was ready to fight. The silence in Lumiere was a living thing, heavy and brittle as if the boutique itself held its breath. The emerald gown lay exposed in its velvet box, its lace glinting under the chandeliers like a stolen treasure. Aisha stood rooted by the counter, her heart pounding a fierce rhythm against her ribs. Her words, "I'm not leaving without my dress," still echoed, a gauntlet thrown in the face of Mrs. Catherine Wentworth's icy disdain. Catherine's hiss, "You don't belong here," hung in the air, a venomous challenge that dared Aisha to break. But Aisha's eyes, dark and unyielding, burned with a fire that refused to be extinguished. The battlefield was set, and the boutique's opulent facade was cracking. Catherine straightened, her pearl bracelet glinting as she folded her arms. Her smile returned, sharper now, a blade honed by years of unchallenged privilege. "This is tiresome," she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the onlookers. "If you're so sure it's yours, prove it. Where's your receipt?" Her Tone was a trap, laced with mockery, as if she knew Aisha's claim was a house of cards. Aisha's hand shot to the counter where her crumpled receipt lay, ignored by Claire, the sales associate. She snatched it up, holding it like a shield. "Right here," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "My name, my deposit, my order. Check it." She thrust the paper toward Claire, who flinched as if it were a weapon. The younger associate, still hovering nearby, darted a nervous glance at Catherine, whose presence loomed like a storm cloud. Claire took the receipt, her lips pursing as she scanned it. The tablet on the counter glowed with the order details, but her hesitation was palpable. "It does show a deposit," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Mrs. Wentworth is a VIP client and—" "VIP?" Aisha cut in, her voice rising sharp and clear. "That doesn't give her the right to take what's mine." The words rang out, drawing gasps from the two women by the gown rack. The man in the suit, now standing, watched with narrowed eyes, his catalog forgotten. The boutique, once a temple of elegance, was unraveling into chaos. Catherine's smile didn't waver, but her eyes darkened. She leaned closer to Claire, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "You know, I've been watching her," she said, loud enough for Aisha to hear. She was lingering by the racks earlier, looking suspicious. I wouldn't be surprised if she's trying to cause trouble. Maybe you should check her bag. The accusation landed like a thunderclap, electrifying the room. The women by the gowns whispered furiously, one pulling out her phone to record. The younger associate gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Aisha's breath caught, her vision narrowing to Catherine's smug face. "What did you say?" she demanded, her voice low but laced with fury. "You're accusing me of stealing? Based on what?" Her hands clenched into fists, the weight of every stare in the room pressing against her. She'd faced prejudice before, sly comments, sidelong glances, but this was different. This was a deliberate attack, meant to humiliate and erase her. Catherine shrugged, her expression one of feigned innocence. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "You don't fit here, and now you're making a scene over a dress you clearly can't afford. It's convenient." Emily, emboldened, stepped forward, her smirk mirroring her mother's. "Yeah, maybe she's just trying to scam you," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "Check her bag. Bet you'll find something." The room erupted in murmurs, the onlookers' faces a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. Claire, caught in the crossfire, looked to the younger associate for guidance, but the woman only shrugged, her eyes wide with panic. I don't know," Claire stammered, clutching the tablet like a lifeline. "Maybe we should—" "Enough." Aisha's voice sliced through the chaos, commanding silence. Her chest heaved, but her gaze was steady, pinning Catherine. "You have no proof. You're lying because you think you can bully me out of what's mine. But you're wrong." She turned to Claire, her tone unwavering. "Check my bag if you want. There's nothing but my wallet and a water bottle. Go ahead." Claire hesitated, her hands trembling as she reached for Aisha's backpack. The crowd leaned in, their phones now openly recording, the soft hum of cameras a chilling backdrop. Aisha handed over her bag, her movements deliberate, her eyes never leaving Catherine's. "Do it," she said, her voice a quiet challenge. Claire rummaged through the bag, pulling out a worn wallet and a half-empty bottle. "Nothing," she muttered, her face flushing with embarrassment. Catherine's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "That proves nothing," she snapped. "She's still causing trouble. Give the dress to Emily." Emily reached for the velvet box, her fingers grazing the emerald lace, but Aisha's hand shot out, slamming the lid shut. "No," she said, her voice a low growl. "You're not taking it." The boutique was a tinderbox now, every whisper and glance fueling the fire. Aisha's heart raced, but her mind was clear. She pulled out her phone, her fingers steady as she dialed. "Mom," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "I need you at Lumiere, now." She hung up, slipping the phone into her pocket, her eyes locked on Catherine. "You'll see," she said, her words a promise. Catherine laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Calling for backup? How quaint. Emily snickered, whispering to her mother. Probably her mom's as broke as she is. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Aisha ignored them, her gaze unwavering. She stood tall, a lone figure against a sea of judgment waiting for the tide to turn. The boutique Lumiere was a cauldron of tension, its opulent chandeliers casting jagged shadows across the marble floor. Aisha stood defiant by the counter, her hand still resting on the closed velvet box that cradled her emerald gown. The air crackled with the aftershock of her words. You'll see. A promise that hung like a storm cloud over Mrs. Catherine Wentworth's smug certainty. Catherine's accusation that Aisha was a thief had ignited whispers among the onlookers, their phones still recording, capturing every moment of the standoff. Emily, Catherine's daughter, lingered close, her earlier bravado dimmed but her smirk intact. The sales associates, Claire and her colleague, fidgeted, their authority crumbling under the weight of Aisha's unyielding resolve. The room was a taut wire, ready to snap. Then the glass doors swung open with a soft chime and the atmosphere shifted as if the very walls exhaled. A woman stepped inside, her presence a quiet thunder. Ngozi, Aisha's mother, wore a white dress that hugged her frame, simple, unadorned, yet radiating an elegance that silenced the room. Her dark skin gleamed under the boutique's lights, and her eyes, sharp and knowing, scanned the scene with the precision of a hawk. Every head turned, the crowd sensing a power shift. Claire's face drained of color, her tablet slipping slightly in her hands. The younger associate gasped, whispering, "Is that Miss Ngozi, the owner?" Ngozi's heels clicked with measured purpose as she crossed the marble floor, her gaze locking onto Aisha. The girl's shoulders relaxed, a flicker of relief softening her defiant stance. Ngozi placed a hand on Aisha's shoulder, her touch warm but firm, and her voice when she spoke was a balm wrapped in steel. "Are you all right, Aisha?" she asked, her eyes searching her daughter's face. Aisha nodded, her voice steady. "I'm okay, Mom, but they're trying to take my dress." Catherine, who had been watching with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, stepped forward, her pearl bracelet glinting as she adjusted her posture. "Your dress?" she said, her tone laced with skepticism. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. My daughter Emily needs that gown for an important event. Surely you can see it's better suited for her." Her smile was a thin veneer, barely masking the arrogance beneath. Ngozi turned, her gaze pinning Catherine like a specimen under glass. The room fell silent, the onlookers' whispers dying as they leaned in, sensing the tide turning. Misunderstanding?" Ngozi repeated, her voice calm but edged with a razor's precision. "My daughter ordered that gown 2 months ago. She paid for it with her own money. Yet you claim it's yours because you think she doesn't belong." Her words were a whip, each one striking at Catherine's composure. Catherine's smile faltered, her face flushing a deep crimson. I didn't mean it like that," she stammered, her voice betraying a crack. "I just thought, she doesn't fit the image of this boutique. I'm a VIP client and—" "VIP?" Ngozi cut in, her tone icy. "Lumiere was built for anyone who loves beauty, not for those who wield privilege like a weapon. Aisha belongs here as much as anyone, more because she earned that gown with her heart." She gestured to the velvet box, her eyes never leaving Catherine's. "That dress is hers and you will not take it." Emily, who had been hovering behind her mother, shrank back, her smirk replaced by a nervous glance. The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others clutching their phones tighter, the hum of recordings a constant undercurrent. Ngozi turned to Claire, her gaze now a storm of disappointment. "You," she said, her voice low but commanding. "You were trained to treat every customer with respect, yet you stood by, letting my daughter be accused of theft, letting her be humiliated. Why?" Claire's hands trembled, the tablet slipping further. I didn't know she was your daughter," she mumbled, her eyes darting to the floor. Ngozi's expression hardened. "Her identity shouldn't matter," she said. "Your job is to uphold fairness, not to bow to prejudice. Your failure reflects on this entire establishment, and I will not tolerate it." She glanced at the younger associate, who shrank under her gaze. "Both of you will face consequences." The crowd erupted in soft applause, a ripple of approval that emboldened Aisha. She lifted the velvet box, opening it to reveal the emerald gown, its lace shimmering like a promise kept. "This is mine," she said, her voice quiet but resonant, directed at Catherine, "and I'm taking it." Catherine, her face now a mask of humiliation, grabbed Emily's arm. "This is absurd," she muttered, her voice shaking. "We don't need this drama." She turned to leave, her heels clicking frantically, but Ngozi's voice stopped her cold. "You judged my daughter without cause," she said, each word deliberate. "You tried to steal her dignity. Remember this moment because it defines you." The doors closed behind Catherine and Emily, their exit a stark contrast to their grand entrance. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some whispering words of support, others shaking their heads at the spectacle. Ngozi turned to Aisha, her expression softening. "I'm proud of you," she said, her hand squeezing Aisha's shoulder. "You stood your ground." Aisha smiled, clutching the gown to her chest. The boutique, once a battlefield, felt lighter now, its opulence restored by the eye. Truth. As mother and daughter stood together, the onlookers watched in awe, their phones still capturing the moment that had rewritten the room's narrative. The auditorium at Juilliard was a cathedral of sound, its vaulted ceiling swallowing the soft murmurs of the audience. Rows of velvet seats brimmed with expectant faces, students, professors, families, all gathered for the annual recital on a crisp Manhattan evening. The stage, bathed in a golden spotlight, stood empty, waiting for its next performer. Backstage, Aisha adjusted the straps of her emerald gown, its lace shimmering like a forest caught in dawn's light. The dress, hard won from the battle at Lumiere, hugged her frame, a symbol of her resilience. Her violin rested in her hands, its polished wood warm against her fingers, a trusted companion ready to sing. Tonight, Aisha wasn't just a girl in a dress. She was a force ready to claim her place in the world. A week had passed since the confrontation at Lumiere, but the memory of Catherine's venomous words and the weight of accusing stares lingered. Aisha had carried those moments like stones, but now, as she stood in the wings, she felt them dissolve. Her mother, Ngozi, sat in the front row, her white dress a quiet beacon of strength. Aisha's heart swelled at the sight. She wasn't alone. The program rustled in the audience's hands, her name printed in bold. Aisha Okoye, violin solo, Vivaldi's Spring. She took a deep breath, her nerves a flickering flame steadied by purpose. This was her moment to shine, not just for herself, but for every girl who'd been told she didn't belong. The stage manager's nod was her cue. Aisha stepped into the spotlight, her gown catching the light in a cascade of green. A hush fell over the auditorium, the audience leaning forward, captivated by her presence. She raised her violin, the bow poised like a painter's brush. Then, with a single deliberate stroke, she began. The notes of Vivaldi's Spring poured forth, bright and delicate, each phrase a burst of life. Her fingers danced across the strings, her body swaying as if the music were a tide pulling her into its depths. The melody soared, filling the room with images of blooming fields and sunlit streams, her performance a tapestry of joy and defiance. The audience was spellbound. A professor in the third row closed his eyes, lost in the music's embrace. The young girl clutching her mother's hand stared wide-eyed, dreaming of her own stage. Ngozi watched, her face radiant with pride, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Aisha's music wasn't just sound, it was a declaration, a rebuttal to every whisper, every sneer that had tried to diminish her. As the final note lingered, pure and haunting, the auditorium erupted. Applause thundered, a tidal wave of admiration that shook the walls. Aisha lowered her violin, her chest heaving, and smiled, a smile of triumph, of knowing she had claimed her place. The crowd rose. To their feet, their cheers a chorus of validation. Aisha bowed, the emerald gown shimmering as she moved and caught her mother's gaze. Ngozi nodded, a silent, "Well done." That meant more than any ovation. As Aisha left the stage, her classmates swarmed her backstage, their voices a jumble of praise. "That was incredible," one said. "You owned it," another added. Aisha clutched her violin, her heart full, the weight of Lumiere's judgment now a distant memory. She had proven herself, not with words, but with the language of her soul.